welcome to the Beyond Cinema and Bio.com studio, Mr. Jóhann Jóhannsson. Icelandic and haunting music. What's going on? Because like there's a few artists that have this ethereal sensitivity. What's going on in the winds of Iceland that's making all this happen?
Yeah, I don't know. It's I mean, Iceland it's a very small, kind of very supportive, very kind of collaborative, you know, kind of artistic environment. You know, like there's like a group of when I was sort of starting out, there was this just group of musicians and artists that were doing stuff together. You know, playing in different bands and kind of feeding off each other. And I guess a lot of those bands, you know, came from the same kind of pool of musicians, you know, that were like we used to, you know, like in the late 90s, you know, we used to play a lot together and do these projects together, like you know, in different kind of configurations and it's I don't know, it feels very kind of, I mean, for me this sound, you know, comes from, I think it's more like from a kind of like an inner landscape, you know, some kind of, you know, I don't know, this sort of it's a little bit hard to maybe, you know, kind of describe in words, you know, where it comes from, but it's you know, maybe something to do with the long night, you know, with the long this sort of Nordic melancholy, I don't know, you know, but maybe that's too much of a cliche, but you know, there's something about the sort of barren landscape also, which is a little bit sort of although, you know, I don't know, my music is not very, you know, I don't take that much inspiration from, you know, the geography of Iceland or the landscape. You know, I'm more, you know, I've lived in cities all my life, and I think I take, you know, I think it's more like an inner kind of, you know, inner geography and inner landscape, you know, like an interior voyage, you know.
Yeah, for sure. In terms of your work for the big screen, obviously you had Mechanic and Prisoners last year here at TIFF as well. Do you visit the sets ever, or are you always in a studio?
It sort of depends on the project. I mean, for Theory of Everything, I was approached fairly late in the process, so it was they had like a rough cut already, and so I wasn't you know, invited to the set. But for example, on Prisoners, I was involved a lot earlier, and so I had a dialogue with Denis Villeneuve, the director, very, very early on, and he invited me to the set as well, so I got to spend a few days on set and discussing things and you know, seeing very early kind of edits and stuff like that, and also to write stuff, you know, write themes very early on. So a lot of the main themes were actually written, you know, before they started editing, and so they were able to edit to the kind of final score in many ways, and so it was very. I really like that process, you know, to be involved early, you know, because then you get a chance to become really you know, part of the DNA of the film, you know, but you know, it all depends on the project, really.
With the Theory of Everything, which is the film that you're here with this year, obviously it's a film about Stephen Hawking. Does the score then, what was that creative discussion like? Does it take account of his profession and the science? Does it, like, what are the elements that make up the way you help tell that story?
Well, I think it's, you know, it's the story of a you know, of a scientist, and but it's also a kind of a family drama and a love story, you know, this sort of kind of bizarre love triangle in a way, and I think the role of the music was very much to underscore, you know, the emotions and the sort of the drama of these relationships, you know, and how they change and how they evolve over you know, 3 decades, you know, because the film has this sort of very broad scope in terms of, you know, it follows, you know, a man's life over 3 decades, so it has this sort of epic sweep, and the music had to kind of follow that and to you know, be a kind of a binding thread throughout, you know, this long, you know, epic voyage really through Hawking's life. And so it was the emotion of the relationships, you know, but also we tried to kind of convey the kind of poetry and the wonder and awe and mystery of his kind of sense of, you know, sense of his research, you know, and of his sort of his sense of his awe for the mysteries of the universe, you know, and the poetry with which he writes about that, you know, and his writing is very, you know, it's very lyrical, it's very beautiful, you know, and he has this sort of lyricism to him, you know, he's like a poet almost, you know, and I drew a lot from that, you know, from this sort of kind of almost sense of mystery and mysticism almost about you know, about the mysteries of the universe, and how he's finding the structure, looking for the structure, and the you know, the underlying theory and the underlying structure of the universe, you know.
In terms of working for composing for the screen versus just composing on other projects for orchestras, etc., do you now find that you like having that narrative thread provided by others versus kind of conceptualizing an album and the story you're telling just completely from with an internal place?
Well, it's sort of I've been very much focusing on film music, like for the last 3 or 4 years, and I think that was kind of like a conscious decision to basically, you know, spend some time, you know, kind of really getting to grips with that art and that kind of that whole kind of sort of way of working really, but I've been putting a lot of projects on the back burner while I've been doing that, and now I'm sort of feeling the need to go back to that, to go back to my own projects, and so there's like a whole backlog of ideas that, and also I've been working on stuff, you know, all, you know, throughout this time. It just hasn't come out, you know, it just hasn't been released. So there's like a whole bunch of projects that are going to come out in the next sort of couple of years that have been sort of germinating, and I've been sort of quietly working on for the last 4 years.
Very cool. Are you a consumer of scores as well? Do you listen to other people's scores?
Oh yes, yeah. I'm a huge film score fan. I mean, I've always been, you know, for a long time, and it's really, you know, kind of a huge part of my kind of musical education has been listening to film scores. So
what are a few that have kind of stuck with you and keep coming up in reference in your brain?
Oh, you know, Bernd Herrmann, Ennio Morricone. I mean, I have hours and hours of Morricone music, and I listen to that all the time. And yeah, Bernd Herrmann is a huge influence. I would say. Then I have. I would say something like, you know, Vangelis's, you know, things like, you know, Blade Runner. Is a huge influence on me, also because of when I heard it. You know, I saw it in the cinema, you know, when I was, you know, 12 or 13, and it just made a huge impact on me, you know, as both as music and as a film, and that soundtrack has really sort of stuck with me throughout the years, and I think I draw a lot from those sweeping lines of his, you know, these sort of really kind of majestic, you know, epic sweep of his music, you know, even though, you know, I mean, you know, I mean, his stuff is very electronic, and you know, I'm mostly orchestral, but and then people like, you know, obviously the minimalists, you know, people like Michael Nyman, Glass and Reich, Steve Reich, and a lot of Gavin Bryars was a huge influence as well, and you know, and that's just one side of it. I mean, I'm very omnivorous, you know, in terms of, you know, music. I listen to everything, you know. From
when did you know it was more than just something you liked and was going to be a career?
Do you mean film music or music?
Music.
I think it was always, always on the back of my mind. I mean, there were.
What was the first time you got paid for it?
I mean, I was always involved in. I mean, I was always in bands. Like from age. I studied piano until I was 18, and sort of to a reasonably high level, and then I went to university and I studied literature and languages, but I was always in bands and I was always doing music, and then I sort of started getting serious about composing, and I started writing orchestral music, started writing for chamber ensembles, and sort of really getting my education writing music for theater, and theater was really my sort of where I learned to write really, and so I worked for a theater company in Iceland for many years, where I got the opportunity to write for ensembles and and my first album, Englaborn, which was kind of the album that made my name originally, and the first time I got my name sort of got out there. That whole album is based on music that I wrote for the theater. And
does that feel like recent memory to you, or does it feel like forever ago?
Well, it's 15 years ago, so it's.
But does it feel still like?
No, it feels fairly recent. Yeah.
It does. Very cool. Well, it was a pleasure meeting you. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Very cool.